everyone, I'm Eric. Welcome back to another episode of the SDR Game podcast. My guest today is David Bentham, Director of Sales Development at Cognism. Dave, great to have you here.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on, Elric.
Yeah, of course. Before we start, can you explain to the listeners what you do at Cognism?
So I personally am the Director of Sales Development. I run the SDR organization. Today we have about 75 globally. It involves, it's about 40 here in the UK. We have 20 out in the US and roughly 15 in Germany. So quite a large group. I came into Cognism back in 2018 and we only had 5 SDRs, so I've been very heavily involved in kind of the expansion of the team, which has been super exciting.
Nice. And how do you organize the team is based on location? So you have the US team focused on North America, I imagine, and then the UK team for all Europe, and then the German German team on Germany.
Yeah, so it's actually a really interesting one and something that we've been debating kind of all year and kind of been going back and forth on. So today our rules of engagement are that each team should have a bias towards their local regions, but in general we're targeting global companies. And a lot of those global companies for our product will make one decision. They'll have one budget, signed. There'll be like maybe one kind of head of RevOps or VP of global sales or someone like that who makes a decision for everybody globally. And we can service everybody globally. So our current rules are that essentially they have to have a presence in your region, but once you hold that account, you target everybody globally. You own everybody globally. And in instances where perhaps you need the language skills of someone else, we can pull those in. So say, for example, I pick up Google, and Google's just my example for everything. If I pick up Google and Germany, and I want to target the German team, but I think the German language skills are going to be important, then I can pull an SDR in from Germany to help and support, and we can create split commission models based off that. So that's the current setup that we've got, which we think is probably the best one.
That's good, because at least you can have a team effort on the account and not just one SDR against another SDR. So that's pretty cool. How do you structure this team? So you mentioned the 3 offices, but then how many? So you are leading the 75 SDRs. Then you have managers and team leads, or how do you structure the team?
Yeah, so we have so it's 8 managers now that we have. So 2 in Germany, 2 in the US, and 4 in the UK. They all roll up to the so in the US and Germany, because the localization, they roll up to the RVPs, the regional vice presidents of sales for their regions. I roll up to the UK RVP, and the 4 UK managers roll up to me. But I suppose like I kind of like have a role where like I spearhead most of the like any changes that need to be made. Any of the structural like global alignment pieces is kind of like my role. So I have like a bit of a dual role in that sense.
Okay. And and your managers, do they have team leads also, some of them, or you don't use team lead manner?
No, we don't. I think just in principle, like I've never really had any team leads. I think perhaps if you've got like a really small team, there might be a requirement for team leads, but generally I prefer that people are either players or they're coaches, and you know, if you can facilitate that would always be my suggestion.
No, same. Yeah, I think the same on this topic, because I've done both models. I've been a team lead, and it's really hard enough to switch between the 2 jobs. So when we were talking last time together, and that's why we are going to talk about hiring today on the podcast, you mentioned to me that over your career, you hired more than 1,000 people at Cognism and other companies. So I'm super excited to talk about this because I think hiring for me, that's a topic should be priority number one as an SDR leader and other revenue leader roles also. But super excited to talk about this. So before we start about talking about your hiring process, I have a question because with the current market situation, for example, when we were thinking about the hiring process at Chili Piper, when I was preparing the hiring plan, for example, the first thing I was planning is the traits we're looking for, the experience and stuff like that. So with the current situation, did your traits change, or are you looking for different things than 2021, for example, or did you evolve on this?
Okay, so just for context, for anybody listening on the 1,000 people that I've hired, previously to working at Cognism, I was in a door-to-door sales role, where I managed a very, like a pretty big door-to-door sales unit, and that role was actually commission-only sales. So the turnover was insane, and essentially what we were trying to do, to be honest with you, is we were just trying to attract people into the job because they didn't cost us anything unless they made themselves once they're in. So from a hiring perspective, I mean, obviously some people we didn't think were a fit, but we were probably trying to bring in about 10 people a week into the job, and then we would expect that maybe half of those would decide it's not for them pretty quickly because of the commissionary nature. But what that gave me really amazing insight into is by lowering the barriers for entry and saying, hey, look, like if you're willing to do the job, like come and do it. It showed me that it's really, really difficult to know who's going to do well or not in a job. And a lot of people that I didn't think were going to do well did amazingly, were the best, and a lot of people that kind of looked like they were nailed on weren't so good. So hiring is hard, is I suppose what I'm saying. The stuff that I've taken, or the stuff that I took into hiring for Cognism, is that I don't actually hire on experience, pretty much at all. And I definitely don't hire on degrees or ages or anything like that. Most of my hiring process is on identifying high achievers, natural high achievers, and people that have like drive and hunger. And what I see from other companies is that they often hire on experience, and that's because the individuals with high drive and hunger but without experience, they haven't built the onboarding process to support those individuals and to get the most out of the drive and hunger. So we've got a really tight onboarding structure that and training structure that I'm really proud of, and so we can just keep bringing in these very raw but highly driven individuals. Has that changed? No, not at all. I think, not at all. I'm trying to think if there would be a reason to change. I truly just don't think there's a reason to change at this stage. We just, we need people that are going to achieve, right? And I think that's our model, is that the people that will achieve are people that are highly driven, and as long as we train them in the right way, then they're going to keep doing that.
So just to make sure, you said you hire only experienced people, people with experience.
No experience.
No.
Oh,
No
sorry.
experience?
I don't care about the experience at all.
Okay. Because now you have the structure to train them and onboard them.
100%. I would actually advise to a lot of people that, especially in the world of SDRing, if you have someone that's got loads and loads of experience, and they've done it for 3-4 years, and I'm speaking exclusively about maybe the SDR role, and I know that there's always fringe cases, and I do a lot of deep diving with SDRs into their background, and I always give people a chance where I can to explain themselves. But I find that someone's been in an SDR role and they've stayed in an SDR role for a long period of time, and especially usually what you see is that they've been doing 6 months here, 9 months here, 6 months here is probably, it suggests that they're not the strongest SDR. Because if you're a good SDR, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know this, like I'm sure a lot of your listeners, the people that are kind of listening to this show are very curious, high achievers, and they probably all want to be account executives, account managers, SDR managers, etc. So that would be kind of my logic.
Okay. So what's the hiring process at Cognism from when a candidate apply, then to the last stage?
Yeah, so super simple process on our side. We have a member of our talent acquisition team call up any CVs or applicants that look or fit the criteria that we've set. They'll do like kind of an initial alignment call. It's mostly about saying, hey, this is the role, these are the expectations, this is the pay that we're offering. Does that align to what you're looking for?
Before you move forward, why at this step? Do you want to make sure you are aligned on the OT you're offering to make sure?
Yeah, I think the pay thing's important, right? Like, I think people know. So I have the same. I don't have pay scales for the SDRs team. We don't pay between. I know certain companies say, okay, we'll pay between 30 and 40K salary, right? That's our bracket. I don't believe that. I think if you're a high performing SDR or salesperson in general, then you'll make the extra money in the commission that you earn, as opposed to salary. That's I suppose my personal view, and it's probably slightly tied into the fact that I don't look for experience, or I don't reward experience necessarily, so it's really alignment there, because we have some people that need a certain amount of money or expect a certain amount of money. So that's kind of very binary, and therefore is quite an easy qualification criteria for us to have.
Yeah, and it's good for candidate experience also, because they don't wait until the late stage to know about this also.
100%. And if it's close, what we advise is if it's close and the pay is, say someone really wants 35,000 and we're offering 33,000, let's say, and there's really a couple of grand in it, then I would hope that our TA team, or what I expect of the talent acquisition team, is that they kind of say, no, look, let's get you into a call, let's have a conversation, let's see how we can go. Because I think we all know, and again, I hope audience knows, that sometimes it's not just about the money, or certainly not about the initial salary, right? If the initial salary is £2,000 less, but actually you are more likely to be at this company in a year and therefore have a salary double that than you are, and it's going to take 2 years in a different company, then from a purely financial standpoint, you would definitely take the former rather than the latter. So that's what we're advising.
Okay, so step number one, the recruiter step. Then what's next?
Yeah, so then they have a one-to-one interview with one of the SDR managers in region. It's relatively relaxed. We're kind of just, again, it's an initial meeting, getting to know each other. The SDR managers ask some questions, I suppose, related to their knowledge of I suppose any of the research they've done on the company, but mostly it's around like their experiences so far, historically, whether it be education, obviously previous work experience, and then also their goals. So like why sales is like a key piece for us. Is like, why do you want to get into sales if you've not done it already? Why are you still applying for sales if you have done it in other companies and maybe not enjoyed it? I don't know. But we really want to see a clear sales focus, and that's incredibly important. And then obviously and really importantly, it's also an opportunity for candidates to come in and ask any questions to us, because I'm a big believer that interviews are as much about businesses finding the right candidates for them as candidates finding the right businesses for them to work for as well, which I think, especially if you're early in your career, sometimes you forget.
Okay, so that's step number 2, interview with the SDR manager. Then what's next?
Yeah, so final step, and to explain why it's the final step, I've heard of companies that do 7-step processes, and that can be really thorough, and that can really kind of help you get to where you want. Again, the nature of the people that I'm hiring is that they're generally very new to their career, and they're not going to have like a bunch of knowledge and experience, and so mostly I'm looking at drive and things like that. So what I don't want to be doing, the negative of doing a really complex and long hiring process, is that you can put people off. You can literally put people off the role because they'll drop out. Good people might drop out because they've already been offered another role by a different company. So we do 3 steps, and so final stage is with myself and the SDR manager, and then we usually bring in one of the SDRs themselves, one of the members of the team. And for us, we do it here in the office because it's an in-office role, like for the best part. So I want to make sure people have done the journey to work to understand what it is. We ask candidates to prepare a 15-minute presentation on why me, why sales, why Cognism, and really that's all about them pitching themselves, them clearly explaining why they want to work for us above others, which is that, again, them understanding me or them understanding and displaying that they have seen that Cognism is the right fit for them. And then why sales, which is, again, going back to it, I want people that are sales focused. I don't want people that are just going to try out sales because they kind of think like, because that's the only job they can get, right? So why me, why sales, why Cognism, 15 minutes, and then short and sweet, and then we open it up to questions. And so I'll ask, I'll generally lead that, ask a lot of questions, pick holes in CVs. I'm pretty direct about like any issues that I might see, because it's not really about the issue, it's about how they're going to respond to it. And then manager gets an opportunity, and then the SDR also gets an opportunity. I like, I brief the SDR that comes in to kind of, I want the SDR to, be able to understand whether they're going to enjoy working. This is someone that's going to enter their team, so I want them to be like, okay, this person is someone that I'm going to enjoy working with, sorry. And then again, it's just opening up the floor to any questions that they might have, and they've got the full range. They've got myself, who can obviously answer like top level discussion. They have the SDR manager would be their direct line, and then obviously the SDR as well as someone who is on the ground doing it, and so they've got the full panel to make sure that they're truly set on this organization.
And how long does it take for this last step? How long it takes? 30 minutes or
45 usually. Yeah, and then we sometimes, then we give them a bit of tour of the office. They can kind of see where they'd be. I keep going back to it, but it is just as much about kind of the candidate and them being like, yeah, this is the company that I want to work for, as vice versa.
And step number 2, the interview with the SDR manager at 30 minutes?
30 minutes, yeah.
30, and the first one? With talent acquisition?
10, 15.
10,
probably.
15. Okay. Oh, so that's really fast. Okay. So yeah, and you mentioned, because also you said that it's a really short process. So how long does it take from a candidate to apply and then to be hired on average?
It depends a lot on the candidate. We can move quick. I've had candidates that have done the second stage, been accepted, and then they've asked to do the final stage like first thing the next morning. And I usually push back on that. I usually say, hey, look, I'm asking you to do a presentation. I really want to make sure you don't rush it. I want you to be prepared. I want you to put your best foot forward. So we tend to push back on that. But I think, honestly, the whole thing could be done within definitely 2 weeks, but maybe even a week if we're timing it right.
Also, something you mentioned when we were talking about hiring the last time together, you were talking a lot about red flags. That's something you are looking for during your process. So what are the red flags you are looking for?
so I had one recently. I'm obviously not going to name names, but I had an interview recently, and this is maybe the biggest red flag I've ever had in my life. So we're in an office team. I'm a big believer of, again, I keep going back to it, but I'm hiring on not experience, but on drive. But it does require us to make sure that we're giving you the skills. And for me, being in office is a great way by osmosis of learning and training all the time and gaining a lot of skills in that way. So because of the setup that we have, which isn't necessarily right for everyone, but I truly believe it's right for us. And also, I do think it's a sign of commitment. There's a lot of talk. I'll get killed. I'm going to get crucified for this, but this is my reality. I have a really deep focus on, right now in the time of life that I'm at. I'm really career focused. I really want I want my career to be a success. And to be honest with you, I'm looking for people that also are in that boat at this moment in time. I don't believe that everybody's going to have the same job forever, especially nowadays. And so, by asking people to come into the office, it kind of, anybody that's actually I'd rather have days at home and stuff like that, and then unless they've got a really, really good reason, it probably means that they're not, they are looking for more of a balance. And so that kind of qualifies them out. But I had this one individual recently who came in, and I was a bit worried about him anyway, and he mentioned the fact that he wanted to have more of a hybrid. He was looking for a hybrid role, and I asked why, because that's fine. We can sometimes cater for it, but I asked why, and he said, "Well, in the winter, it's going to be really cold on my way to work," and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I was like, maybe this isn't going to be a fit. This one, I don't know. So yeah, that was a big red flag. But yeah, I suppose for me, I want people with that commitment. So that would be a big one. Accountability is something that's really important for me, and I think is important for salespeople as well. I think it's, I always tell my team that the first thing you should do when things aren't going right is look inwardly and focus on the things that you can control. And now sometimes there are outside factors, and feedback's also important. So sometimes it's important to go to your manager and be like, "Hey, my AE, I'm struggling with my AE, or I'm struggling with my accounts," right? But do that on the back of looking inwardly first. And so because of that fact, because I'm looking for accountability, when I'm asking about old jobs or their performance at old jobs, if the way they respond is blaming old managers and the old system a lot, that's a massive red flag for me as well. If they're not taking any accountability, any responsibility, and again, I try and be as fair as possible, because sometimes there are really bad situations, and I try and say, "Hey, look, so what steps did you take to remedy, the poor relationship you have with the manager?" And if they can't give me any examples of that, then again, that's a massive red flag. So, yeah, off the top of my head, there's a couple of red flags.
How do you?
Do you have any big red flags?
Yeah. Also, I have to. But what question do you ask? For example, do you say, "Hey, tell me about a time you disagree with your manager," or what kind of question you're asking to assess accountability?
Well, generally, I just have a very it's not a specific question. I suppose it's the same. So I kind of think of interviews as similarly to the way that I think of sales pitches. I'm not, there's no one question or complete talk track. I think I just try and I generally just go through the CV and go through their history, and say, "Okay, you did 9 months at this organization. Can you tell me a little bit about that?" I will ask, the main thing is okay, why did you end up leaving? I'll always ask why they left every step of every single position. And then if they say, "Oh, it's because of, it's because I hated my manager because he was an arse," which is fine. It's, that's fine. Sometimes you have bad managers, but then if you go, "Okay, can you explain?" I'll just keep digging in and digging in and digging into that point. Because I think it will really kind of show their character in that sense.
And you're right on that, because it's not just on say, hey, I had a bad manager, but yeah, what action did you take? Did you try? I don't know if it was really a bad manager. Did you try to move to another team, to have another manager, to talk to the manager of your manager, or to find a solution? So to go back to your questions, yes, I have a few red flags I'm looking for. Generally, it's we didn't talk about the role play for you, but we were doing a role play, and during the role play, so we do two generally, but at the end of the first one, we give feedback, and here I'm looking for some red flags, and so there is different things, but the way how they react about the feedback we're giving, are they taking the feedback positively? I think there is three different type of response here. There is they're asking question, and here that's pretty good. If they're asking question about the feedback, generally most of candidates, they don't say anything. They not, and that's it. Then you have people who are defensive about the feedback you're giving, and here that's the red flag I'm looking for. If you have someone saying, yeah, but I didn't know that I was supposed to do that, and here that's a red flag for me, because we're not blaming the person, we're just giving feedback to the person, and that's something I'm looking for. Then there is, like you're mentioning, you always leave time during your interviews for them asking questions. Sometimes I have candidates who don't ask questions when we leave them questions, and here that's a same red flag, because in sales you need to be you need to be curious, and if you're not asking questions, that's a red flag for me. And I think also something I was thinking about doing in my next interviews, and I don't know what you think about that, but also another red flag I will look for, it's when you ask, what do you know about X company, and what do you know about me personally? And if they can't reply to us, same here, it's another red flag, because as an SDR, you should be prepped for the interview.
We actually do that. So I cover that base kind of with all the managers cover that base in that first interview. Because yeah, you know, there's some standard stuff that you'd expect of any interview scenario, and one of them's doing your research. So yeah, I think one other one came to mind quickly there, and it was so I think a lot of sales interviews can be full of cliches. So it can be I'm competitive, I'm money hungry, I like to be the best, I like to communicate with people, right? Like I like to interact with people. I don't want to just sit behind Excels. And that's fine, and it's great, right? But let's take the competitive one for example. So saying I'm competitive to me is never enough. And so what I always do is, if they've said I'm competitive, I will ask the question, okay, so can you give me one example of where you were competitive in your personal life today? Like, give me an example of you being competitive today. Because I'm the most competitive person. I, hand on heart, believe that I could be up there in the top 0.01 percentile of humans in terms of competitiveness. That's my whole drive, is competitiveness. And I'm toxic. I'm actually like so competitive, it's bad. And that's why I became a manager, is because people hated me because I'm so competitive. But I can't compete against myself, so it's fine. Or I can compete against myself. I can name a million different ways that I'm being competitive right now, down to, last weekend playing Jenga till 4 a.m. with my sister, because it just got so competitive that it needs to keep going on and on and on, right? And that's like, it's super, super easy for me to do that. So it's a lot of the time, again, I think a big red flag for me is if you're saying all the cliches, but you don't have anything to back it up with.
The things you are looking for in your candidates. So you said high achievers, driven, and hunger also. So how do you, because you said you don't have like specific questions, but earlier we are talking about assessing accountability, but what do you do with, I don't know, for example, a driven person? How do you find someone who's driven?
So I read a study once, actually, or I read an article, and it was all about a scientific study that was done or maybe it was a book, I don't know. I read somewhere that a lot of interviewers ask about hypothetical questions about the future. So they'll go, Elric, I'm going to put you in a scenario where you're really struggling in your role. What do you do? Right? You're really struggling. You can't get to the bottom of this situation. And I think everybody knows that in this hypothetical world, they'll say something like, oh, well, I'd go and speak to my manager. And speaking about future states and hypothetical future states, this is what the study shows, is not often it's not a true reflection of people's actual actions. And so it says to always focus on what people have done in the past in all different walks of life, not just the relevant experience, but there's why were they studying this at school and then they move to do a completely unrelated subject in a university, right? That might be an example. And if you focus on the past and what they've done so far and the decision-making processes that they've had in the past, that'll be a much more accurate reflection of the future. And the study actually says that hiring today, statistically, is a coin flip. It's a 50-50 whether people get it right or wrong. But from their work and when they tested hiring managers and got them to focus on the past and decision makers and posts in the past, it was the one way that they found where you can increase your odds of a positive hire to more than 50%. So I've really adopted that. Like, I really believe in it. And I get the logic and I really believe in it. So talking about drive, it goes back to me talking about their past and talking about, if I can see that someone was at university and they were like the top achiever, right? Their grade was like through the roof. I don't care whether their grade was the top or the bottom, because I don't think it says everything. But certainly if I know that they're the sort of person that's pushed themselves to getting to be the top achiever at university, for example, then that probably suggests that they've got this innate inner drive. And then I'll ask them about that, and I'll ask them about the process, and I'll ask them about what motivated them, and I'll kind of, I'll really double down on that. Or it could be a sporting example. I think a lot of salespeople have been sports people in the past, and you see it time and time again I certainly see it where I've got someone who was the president of a football club, at a school or whatever, whereas they kind of they've really got involved in sports and they push themselves to be in charge, to be put in that position where at the top, and that shows drive. But it doesn't matter, that you could be I always say you could be the Tiddlywinks world champion, for all I care. Like, it doesn't really matter. But I think if you have the personality where you've pushed yourself to be more than average in the past, then that probably suggests that you've got drive, you've got ambition and drive that will be hopefully reflected in the future.
So I don't know if it's from this book, but actually I was reading a book and they were talking about this. So it's never hire a bad salesperson again. And there is a chapter talking about this, focusing on behavioral questions instead of future state questions. And I didn't think about that actually until 3 months ago, something like that. So, and yeah, I think talking about the past is easier to predict the future. So, and do you do the same for high achievers and hunger also? Do you ask similar questions, or how do you assess
for hunger?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I put hunger and drive into very similar categories. I suppose. I do ask questions. I know I've just said that you don't speak about future states, but I do often ask questions about where they want to be. It's a bit of a cliche question, but I do want to ask what they want to be doing. But for me, it's not what they want to be doing; it's why they want to be doing it. And then usually, what I'm really looking for is them to say, I want to. I really double down on it. So I go, okay, a really common answer is I want to buy a house before I'm 30, right? And then I'll go, okay, and why is that important to you? And they'll be like, because that gives me security and everything else. I go, why do you want security, right? And I'll really kind of lay it back. And what I'm hoping for is to find something that perhaps is, it's I suppose it's quite deep, but like usually people of a certain age and a certain maturity understands where their drivers come from. So my competitive streak, for example, is I'm the eldest of 3 kids, and my dad made a point from literally when I was a very small child of every time we did anything competitive together, he would do everything he can to make my younger siblings win. And same with my mum. So it always felt like everything I had to do at such a high level to beat, because it was me versus my whole family. I really do believe that that's the deep-rooted logic in it. I'm sure there's some other stuff as well, but everything. So hunger and drive, like I suppose I want to see that it's happened in the past and that people have shown that in the past, but also even more ideally is people understand where that drive comes from, and they can clearly communicate that.
And also, we were talking about that we were doing like role plays during the hiring process. Why did you make the decision to don't have role plays during the process?
When I was applying for SDR roles back in 2018, I did a role play. I was asked to do a role play by one company that I interviewed at, and firstly, my recruiter coached me through the whole process. Coached me on what I needed to say, what the values were of the, what values were that I needed to talk about, like how I should intro it, etc. So I basically got all the answers. And the second thing is, so I'm worried about that first and foremost. But I suppose leaning into that and I suppose again, because of the people that we're hiring, I'm not hiring people with experience. I'm hiring people with drive and hunger who if they've got hunger and drive and they're coachable, you mentioned coachability, then I believe that we have the coaching and training process to allow that to train them in how to cold call. Right, that's my job. I get them in on the first day, first month. I'm gonna role play with them. I'm gonna role play with them. Now, some people you might say to me, well, look, Dave, what the role play is doing for me is it's allowing me to understand, people's tonality and whether they can inflect, and it's making me understand people's natural empathy. So that I'll give them an objection. I'll see how they naturally respond to that. But I think I get that out of the presentation and other aspects of the interview, in a way where I'm not penalizing someone who could be really good if they're given the training. That's what I don't want to do. Is I don't want to, I'm often hiring people without SDR experience. How can I expect them to know how to successfully make a cold call? So I'm happy to debate that one because it's an interesting point.
No, but it's based on what you're assessing during the process, because if with the other question you're asking or what you're looking for, you don't need to, because it's redundant with the rest of the process. So it's just making sure they are coachable but you are already assessing this at other steps. So, but I think what I'm seeing wrong with role plays generally, they are looking to see the way they are doing cold calls. When, like you said, if you have the proper training and onboarding, you will be great at cold calls. But I think it should be more based on the traits of the person instead of are they good on the phone or not. Because during an interview, generally people they are stressed. So generally, for me at Chili Pepper, actually I didn't do a good job on the role plays that we had. So. But I think they were not assessing on the performance of the call, but more the way you react, the questions you're asking, or are you taking the feedback? Are you coachable on the feedback they're giving you? So,
no, I love that you mentioned earlier that you use it as a coachability thing. I actually I always ask my SDR manager who runs the first interview to always even if they've been absolutely perfect, find one piece of negative feedback for them. and tell them it, and then work out a way of assessing it in the second. So I remember one guy I interviewed when I did the first and second, and he kept calling me mate. Now, I'm quite a casual guy. Like, generally speaking, I'm a super casual guy. Like, but there was something about the way he said it, and he just kept calling me mate. And I think it came across as quite unprofessional. And so I said at the end of I used that as my coachability thing. So I said at the end of the interview, I was like, look, you've done a great job. I really, I really would like you to come to a second, but I need you to know that, like, there's just one piece of negative feedback, which is that I think you calling me mate can come across as unprofessional. And he came to the second round interview, and he just couldn't stop calling me mate again. And I was like, what can I do, right? Like, it's such a clear-cut one.
Yeah, and I know that we can talk a lot about this, but that's something also we are trying to do during the interview. So all the negative feedback from the person who had, I was sending it to the next person in the hiring process, to making sure they are going to assess them on the feedback I gave them, to see if they are applying this feedback. So yeah, I really love that. So we are at the end of the interview. So normally I had some question about onboarding, but I think we should do a second episode to talk about onboarding. But the two last questions I have is, what advice would you give to an SDR leader who is trying to improve his hiring process, and what advice should they ignore?
So I don't want to keep reiterating the same points, but you should ignore anybody that says to hire on experience. Experience means nothing if you train people correctly. Experience is less if you can train people properly. Maybe I'll be less absolute on that. Certainly in the SDR role, right? Certainly thinking about SDRs, the best SDRs that I've ever seen. I mean, right now, the best SDR that we've got on the team joined us, and she used to work in Ted Baker as a store assistant. So she had a bit of customer service experience, but she'd definitely never been an SDR before, and she's blowing everybody out of the park. We have another guy who is, generally people are kind of like 22 to 26-ish. Big generalizations, certainly not everybody, but the best performer in our team, or one of the best performers in our team right now, is an 18-year-old. He's come straight out of school, and he's amazing. Like, he really is incredible. So ignore that. The advice that I would give is make sure, especially if you're new to hiring, and maybe this is a piece of advice for people that are new. I'd like to think that most people that have kind of got lots of experience will know this, but for anybody that's new, make sure that you understand that it is just as much about you trying to find the right candidate as the candidate trying to find the right company. And so it's going to be incredibly important that you present yourself in the best way. When I was doing interviews back in 2018, I mentioned already that I had to do the role play, but there was also an interview that I went to, and it was like a Friday afternoon, and the hiring manager, I thought the company was great going in, and then the hiring manager kind of kept talking about going to the pub and how he just wanted to get out of here, and he just did not look up for it at all, and there was no way I was ever going to go to that company. So just make sure that you understand that, you're selling yourself and your organization as much as the other way around. I think that would be my other piece of advice.
Nice. Well, Dave, it was a great conversation. Thank you for taking the time today to come on the podcast. And for everybody listening, thanks for listening. So, Dave, I see you soon on another episode.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm actually about to go. I've got a candidate waiting outside my door, ironically. So, better get going. But really, really appreciate it. See you next time.